Family, welcome to another episode of Financial Freedom. It's so good to have you. And as always, I gotta say thank you. We started on March 19th, 2020, in the midst of a pandemic, looking to give you inspiration and information. And y'all took one episode, gave it 10 million views, and then we were able to expand to 35 different shows and over 45 million different views. And we couldn't have done it without you. So thank you so much. You can find us on various streaming platforms on under the handle at the Hope TV, all caps, one word, at the Hope TV. Well, family, we're back with part two. We were having such a good conversation with the last episode. I had to keep him back for a little bit more discussion. So he gonna hang out with us a little bit more. And of course, I'm talking to Quinn Green. He is a man of education, one who definitely believes in educating himself for what he's doing, which is real estate, land ownership, educating other people about it, how it's done. He's been through numerous training programs from the Lusk Center for Real Estate Ross Minority Program in Real Estate Development to Real Estate Associates Program of Atlanta. He's a graduate of GSU, where he earned his bachelor's in management and marketing with a concentration in real estate development. He's been given the award of the Atlanta Business Chronicle for the 40 Under 40 award. He's a candidate for the CCIM designation, which is a certified commercial investment member. He's about to get his MBA in 2021. He ain't got it yet, but I'm gonna go ahead and speak that into existence. MBA 2021 from Kennesaw State University. He's a planning director for the Real Estate Associate Program of Atlanta. So he was trained there and then decided to go back and run it. So the brother is a great man and also spends time volunteering for the Habitat for Humanity, United Way. He's a mentor. He's a speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Quinn Green. He took some time out because he decided he wasn't going to try and take over the world today. So welcome back, brother. Welcome back to this episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you for bringing me back. Thank you for having me. I definitely appreciate
Yo,
that.
you are welcome. You are welcome. I said this last episode, but every time I look over some of our guest resumes, I'm like, yo, I haven't done enough of my life. This is insane. I just realized that you are the director of a program that you were trained by, and you just decided to go back and y'all did a great job. By the way, I'm going to run you now, and that's
Facts.
okay. That's how it
Facts.
works.
Yeah,
Facts.
yeah.
All right, I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take it. Yo, before we left off on the last episode, we talked about more individualized buying the block, quote unquote, right? But you brought up something that I think was a very good talking point, and there's so much on this topic. I felt like we could have talked for a long time. But so let me just dig in. We were talking about a real estate investment trust or trusts across the board. Um, but I want to take it from this question first. There is a huge movement talking about buying back the block to fight gentrification. You've heard Ti and his business buy back the block. Killer Mike with the Greenwood Bank. From your perspective as a realtor, you talked about after you learn the history of land and Black people in America in relation to the land, it inspires you to get involved in land ownership and real estate and so on and so forth. From your perspective, how do you see the buy back the block movement and that movement of Greenwood that Killer Mike has done when it comes to managing our own money?
So the Greenwood in particular is an interesting story just based on the history that it's pulling from. So that dates back to the 1940s in terms
Hmm.
of the Black Wall Street movement that was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And in Tulsa,
Right.
Oklahoma, they had an area called the Greenwood District. And the Greenwood District
Okay.
was essentially the Black Wall Street. And just some of the context on that was back in the 40s, it was segregated. So
Right.
segregation forced Black people to live together. And what they did was they used their togetherness and created an ecosystem. So you had
Right.
educated trade professionals and just business professionals that lived in the same community. And what they did was they circulated their money in the
Right.
community. And I think they it literally was, the money had changed hands and it cycled, 6 or 7 times before it went outside of that community of
Right.
Greenwood. So they understood economics partially because they had to, because they were doing business with themselves and they were able to build an ecosystem and a community that supported each other. And,
Mm-hmm.
being able to own real estate, being able to own businesses helped them to be self-sufficient, where they didn't have to
Right.
rely on what I call the majority. So, fast forward from that time, there was a unfortunate situation where there was a massacre, and that community was devastated. It was burned down to the ground, and it took them about 20 years to get it back up and running to where they were able to have 200 and plus some odd Black-owned businesses still thriving. But what happened after that was desegregation, and desegregation allowed them to take their money wherever they wanted to go because now they could intermingle with the
Right.
majority. So once that money left that community, then it no longer thrived. But the history and the context of it is so significant that Killer Mike, Andrew Young, the young lady who runs Slutty Vegan, and a number of other folks came together and said, "Hey, look, we need to do a better job as Black and Brown people in terms of economics and really just getting our finances together." And they started that bank movement. If
Mm-hmm.
anything, there's not a lot of Black-owned banks, so you can
Right.
almost count on one
Right.
hand the number of financial institutions that are actually owned by banks. Obviously, Greenwood having the platform that they have, I think they've got more of a virtual and technologically
Right.
appealing approach. But you've got historic banks like Citizens Trust in downtown, and that's a Black-owned bank. And that, like I said, there's a handful of them. But just to know the economics behind it, if you can do business with other brown and Black people, people of color, then that's how we begin to accumulate wealth.
Gotcha. And that's such a rich history of that entire thing. And so you have people now who are digging back into the history, who are willing to, and celebrities who are willing to throw their celebrity behind these movements to be able to draw attention to, well, at one point was a grassroots thing, is becoming more of a public mainstream thing. And I think that's just awesome. Um,
Well, part of that buy back the block is because there has been an effort to what they call gentrified neighborhoods. And, where Black and brown people live today is desirable, particularly in urban cores, like in urban corridors, so downtown areas. And, the majority wants to move back into those areas, and that's historically where the African Americans have been. So generally, if I travel to other cities, I say anywhere where you can find an MLK, at MLK Street, that's normally where
hey,
that there's gonna be us, and then there's gonna be some effort of gentrification. So, the whole premise behind buying back the block is getting to a point where you're taking back control of your neighborhood. And a lot of these neighborhoods haven't had the attention or the love or the TLC that's needed to keep them up. So you have blight, you have vacancies, you have crime, you have all of these things that are systemic to a
I
neighborhood.
want to go back.
And
I want to go
go
back to
ahead.
that comment you just made. That term you just used. You said blight. Tell me what that
Yes.
is.
Yeah, so great question. And I would say in terms of blight, if you've ever seen a property that's boarded up or where the grass is overgrown or where there's graffiti on it or broken windows, etc., it essentially is a property that is no longer being taken care of by its owner. And generally, when you have a property, and a lot of times you'll have that where either it's an estate situation where our people have had it and just haven't had the money to take care of it, or the estate lives out of state, so they don't have a set of eyes there to properly maintain it. Sometimes it's what they call an absentee owner, where it might be like an investment company or somebody who's bought it and they're just sitting on it because the dirt or the land is more valuable than the structure. They don't care about the
Right.
structure, they just care about the dirt. So buy back the block is an initiative to say, hey, look, we're tired of having these eyesores in our community. We're tired of having this blight in our community that potentially attracts crime and things that are not becoming of a thriving community, we want to take ownership. And not only do we want to take ownership, we want to elevate that asset. We want to help to bring up the property values. We want to help neighbors to where their properties can appreciate. And part of that is buying. So you have to own the dirt. One of the things that I talk to with my investors and my clients is what I consider the golden rule. And
Mm-hmm.
the golden rule traditionally is do unto others as you had them do unto you. But the golden rule
Right.
as it relates to asset and real estate is he who has the gold makes the rules. So if
Right.
you own land, then you control what happens on that land. So when you buy back the block, you basically are controlling what happens on that land in terms of being able to upkeep it, in terms of who goes into it, in terms of what that property looks like from a maintenance and
Right.
repair. So it just gives you a lot more power to control your community when you own the block.
And I wanna stop on that dime for a moment because I've heard different terms, and the reason why black caught my attention is because there's something that we call white flight, right? When black people move into a certain place and they bounce, they gone, they take their resources with them, they take their all the subsidies is gone, they take it with them, right?
Sure.
Even if this is a
Yep.
well-to-do black person who's doing everything they should be doing, but then you also have this idea of black flight, of this idea of I got some money now. Deuce out, Negroes. I'm out. Y'all, I done had enough of y'all. We ain't gonna do this no more. I done got my money. I got my $2 million check. I done got this ball contract. I got signed. I'm out.
Right. Yep.
You have
Yep.
this idea, and I've heard several different people discuss this idea that I've even heard conservative black people and liberal black people and everybody in between argue different points along this spectrum of, well, there's no such thing as gentrification. If black people would take ownership of their own communities instead of leaving their community, they would own their community. It wouldn't be a problem. How can you be mad at other people for buying what you abandoned? As a brother being in your position of being as educated as you are, being as many places as you've been, how would you respond to something like that?
That's that's tough. So yeah, there's going to be that perspective, right? And that's not uncommon. But there's a story behind every property that's been neglected. There literally is a story behind every property. You don't know what people's financial situation is. You don't know what struggles, what challenges they've had. And it's generally people expect the worst. They assume the worst.
Mhm.
But I literally know
Right.
people whose family just didn't have it. Like that was all they had was the land, but they didn't have the money to maintain it. And
Okay.
property ownership is great, but it comes with a price. It comes with a cost. And if you're in a situation where you don't have the resources to maintain it, but it's passed down in the family and it's a tradition, etc., you might be doing all you can just to pay the taxes. You might be doing all you can just to pay the insurance because you got it. Those are certain costs that are associated with it. So I personally
Mhm.
have a relative now that is maintaining a property in another state, and he's on a fixed income. He's Social Security, etc. And the grass grew, and the code enforcement came by, and they hit him with a bunch of fees, and he just couldn't pay it. He couldn't to now. For he was in a position of family members and say, hey, I need help, but not everybody has those resources. So I would say everybody's situation is different. I try not to assume. There's a lot of people that go and they prey off of people who are in tough situations financially,
Right.
and that's generally
Women.
what you'll see is they'll go in and they will literally finagle a property from up under somebody, and just because they're in a tight. What I would say is, but to think about buying back the block, or if you're on the end of, you're the one in the tight situation, right? So it's one thing to think, oh, I'm just going to be able to buy all this stuff, etc. But you got to think about that person on the other side. So if there's anybody listening to this who is in that tight situation, who has property, etc., and just can't afford to maintain it, I would say engage a realtor, a professional that can talk through options with you so you don't get tricked out of your land. Because a lot of times that's what ends up happening, Derek, and it's unfortunate. But you'll have seniors that run into that all the time, and it's a bad situation. But if you are in the space where you want to buy back the block, a lot of times you can actually ride down a street and see where there's distress. And part of being able to buy back the block is, okay, identifying where there's opportunity, right? And if you're thinking community particularly, and you see where there is, to your point, the blight, the property that's run down, the property that's been neglected, etc., what you can do is you can go and check the tax records or the county court records and find out who the owner is. And then you can contact the owner directly and get the backstory on the situation. And what may end up happening is it may be an opportunity for you to actually step in, and maybe maybe they are in a position where they want to sell, and maybe they be willing to sell it to you. So I think just realistically, if you're looking at buying back the block, first you've got to identify what area you want to concentrate in and get
Got
familiar with that community, and then do the
you.
research. Do the research, or hire a professional and engage them to help you with the research. But I think that's where you find some of the opportunities, is you concentrate on an area and you find out where somebody might be in a position where they might be open to a conversation about selling, and then take it from that direction.
Wow. Wow. That's good information. That's good information. When I approach a realtor, right, and let's say I'm all in. I want to do this.
Yep.
What do I need to have in line to approach my realtor to make our time valuable?
Well, first you got to have an open mind, right? So you got to have that mindset to say, "Hey, look, this is what that real estate person does for a living." So regardless of what you're able to research online and read articles, etc., this is how this person eats, and hopefully you're picking somebody who is a licensed professional that has experience doing the work. So you let them work in their lane and you stay in your lane, and somehow you come together and make a deal happen. But essentially, surrounding yourself with people that work in that space so you can get multiple perspectives. I always recommend to talk to more than one professional in any area that you're looking to try to do business in, right? So talk to more than one real estate broker, talk to more than one real estate agent, find out who has personality that complements what you're trying to accomplish, right? If you feel that you can work with them, if you feel that they're bringing or adding you to what your mission goal is. And a lot of times real estate people will be in a space where, because that's how they eat, they're just focused on the deal. That may not be the way you want to do business. You may want somebody to really dive into your mission. Maybe you're mission based and you like, hey, look, I genuinely want to give back to the community. I genuinely want to be a stakeholder in the community. And this is not just transactional. So you've got to, talk to a few people, have a vision. So once you make up your mind, you're going to deal with a real estate professional, have a vision and have a plan. And if you have a vision, and I recommend writing it down. If you write it down, like that makes it concrete. And if you put your vision or your plan on paper and you go to a professional, then it's just going to make it for a much more efficient meeting. And hopefully you can talk through or kind of ideate, okay, how do I get to my end goal or the end game, right? And they should be able to outline for you how they're going to bring value to help you get there.
Let me ask you this, because I've heard this before on quite a few of our episodes, where people will say, "Yeah, look, you need to build a relationship with your banker, build a relationship with your lawyer, build a relationship with whoever it is for whatever you got going on." How do you vet? How do you appropriately vet a real estate professional? Because it dawns on me that when I'm talking to a banker, I'm not going to vet my banker the same way, or maybe I might. Um, then I may vet my real estate professional or my mortgage professional or whatever. How do you appropriately vet these people in real estate to make sure? Because I see ads all day long on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter about training programs and this program, and come let me show you how you can flip 4 houses in 15 seconds by just doing. I'm trying to figure out how do I appropriately vet, how do I sift through all of these professionals trying to sell me the secrets of the millionaires to find the appropriate real estate profession.
So generally you can find people through word of mouth. And I would recommend, anytime you got somebody who's willing to endorse another person, that's generally a good sign. So yeah, I could buy all the marketing material. I could have billboards, I could do, web ads on Zillow and all kind of other things. But I will tell you, really 100% of my business is referral. Like I don't buy leads and do it. Like literally I do business with people who know me. And they will refer and say, hey, look, this is the space that Quinn is in. You should talk to him. Let's talk through what your goals and missions are. This is the experience I had with him. And if they sell my services, right? They endure. And if you end up talking, and what I mean by that is you can get through word of mouth a referral. So to your point, say you do have a relationship with a banker, and through your relationship with the banker, because you've got, a checking deposit, savings account, etc., and you've been dealing with this bank for a while. If you ask that banker, hey, who's your real estate person? Who are you doing business with? And they're willing to give
Mhm.
you a name, that means they're putting their name on the line. They're putting their credibility on the line because they don't want somebody to do you wrong, right? Because it's going to come back to them. So they're going to give some
Right.
thought to, okay, who am I referring over? So I would say, if anything, if you don't want to just go cold and pick somebody randomly on the internet, or you see a billboard like, oh, that's a person I need to call. Look for an endorsement from somebody who you know personally. Look for an endorsement through word of mouth. And if you can get those kind of connections, you can technically build a team. So you can have a banker, you can have a real estate person, you can have an attorney, contractors, etc. All the skill sets that you would need to effectively meet your goal in real estate.
Got you. That's always good to know because I'm no longer the networking guru I used to be. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's this pandemic because I be in the house by myself, very happy alone.
It,
So it's
It's
like,
cold. It's
what do
it's
I do?
COVID right now. Like literally, you are keeping yourself from being on a ventilator. So the fact that you are not out there networking is safety first, brother. That's the safest thing you could be doing right now is being at home. There's people out there that are putting their toe in the water and they're getting out and about, etc. But the way that
Yeah,
we have been trending as a country in this pandemic, you are taking the best route, which is being home, have these kind of interactions where you're dealing with folks virtually, and get your referral that way. Do your
yeah.
networking from that perspective. A friend of a
Got
friend,
you.
a what I call a warm lead is always going to be your best bet. So instead of going out and meeting random people, you can, look at your sphere of influence, look at your family, look at your church network, just look at where your network is, and then just,
Got you.
ask around and say, hey, look, this is what I'm looking for. Do you have
Yeah.
anybody who you would recommend? And you'd be surprised how well you can network just based on reaching out to your circle.
Got you. I love it. I love it. I want to hit on this before we get too late in the episode. You mentioned something last episode. I believe it's called a real estate investment trust. And that has something to do with funding this effort to buy back the block. So I'm curious. Well, two things. Let's do that one first. But the real estate investment trust, what is that?
So, real estate investment trust actually is an investment vehicle that operates very similar to like if you were buying stock. So, real estate
Hmm.
investment trusts are traded on the stock exchange, and essentially you can buy into a REIT, a real estate investment trust. And what real estate investment trusts do is they take that money that you purchase shares in the REIT, and then they go and they use that capital to buy really expensive assets like office buildings and shopping centers and all kind of big
I
stuff
want to
that
get back to that
partic-
in a minute too.
you wouldn't necessarily be able to purchase on your own. The other unique thing about real estate investment trusts is when you buy those shares, a lot of them are set up to where they'll pay dividends as well. So it's a different way to invest in real estate where you don't have to deal with, to your point earlier in the last episode, having to maintain a property, having to do anything related to that transaction. All you do is you have the share, and they have asset managers and people that literally manage that asset. And as it performs and as they get lease income, then they give some type of return to the folks who own shares in that real estate investment trust. So that's more of a stock play, a stock vehicle, but it's a way that you can
Right.
invest in commercial real estate and not necessarily have to be in the weeds in terms of a property. Little small piece of a really profitable, really big asset. Outside of real estate
Okay.
investment, two things that I want to throw real quick in terms of
Okay.
being able to invest in real estate. One is
Okay.
something called a syndication. And a syndication
Say it again.
is a syndication. So,
Got you.
syndication. So, syndication is where basically you're pulling money to provide equity for the purchase of a property. So if you think on the residential side, when you go out to buy a house, you generally don't get a loan for 100%. Now, if you're a veteran, maybe, but for the most part, if you're buying a property, you have a certain amount of your acquisition that is debt or financing, and then you have a very small piece that's considered your equity or your down payment, right? So generally, it's
Okay.
about 3% of a transaction. So you think about a pie, you got 100% pie. 3% of that is generally the money you have saved up. Well,
Okay.
in a commercial transaction where you're dealing with apartments and offices and hotels, etc., the debt is a little different. But actually, it's a lot different because there's more risk, right? There's more risk. So
Okay.
typically, when you're
Okay.
doing a commercial deal, you don't have 90% debt. You generally have something like 70, between 70 to 60% debt. So if you have 70 to
Okay.
60% debt, you have to make up that difference to get it to 100%. They call that the equity or the capital stack. So in
Okay.
equity, really what you can do is you can have a syndication where they pool money from a lot of different people, and then you can make up that gap in terms of the capital stack. Very similarly, there's something called crowdfunding. So crowdfunding is also where you can have a very small amount of money that you put in, but you can be part of a much larger project. So if anything, I would say look at crowdfunding, look at syndication, look at real estate investment trust. And that's the way that you can really dive in with what you have today versus having to have thousands of dollars to make a
Right.
acquisition. A lot of people get intimidated because of how much money typically is needed to play in real estate. But one thing that
Yeah.
those vehicles do, each of those vehicles, is what they do is they pool resources of like-minded people that have one common goal. And the one common goal is to have ownership and to have a return on investment. So as long as you focus from that perspective, you can literally use any of those vehicles and potentially have a interest in something that's much bigger when you talk about buying back the block. One thing that you will see in particularly communities with brown and black people is something called an opportunity zone. And I'm just gonna
Oh,
put a pin
okay.
in that because we could literally go down a whole nother show talking about opportunity zones.
Look, man,
But if you
I'm gonna need you to
Google,
come on now because you got to have a part
if,
three. All right, go ahead.
right, if you just Google opportunity zones, it's an initiative that came out of the 2017 tax plan. But essentially, what
Okay.
it does is it was created to help people who had exposure to capital gains tax defer their capital gains by investing in areas, properties, or businesses where there was low income census tract, right? So based on census data, there are certain areas that are not necessarily performing the best economically. And these
Right.
opportunity zones literally on a map were carved out to say, hey, look, if you invest in this area, then you can defer your capital gains or potentially eliminate capital gains. So
Okay.
opportunity zones typically are in Black communities, and that's an area where people are literally buying back the block just because of the benefits that come with it as it
Um,
relates to taxes.
got you. That is, man, that's some good information. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Green, of being here. You've taken 3 seconds from massively achieving to just come on the show and spend a little bit of time with us. So I appreciate that. Yo, this has been a really good conversation. There's a lot that you dropped on here. I'm gonna have to research myself. Hopefully, I'm coming up with some ideas, and we may have to have you back because you just got a lot of good information for us. Will you come back and join us
I love
again
to
if
be
you
back.
can?
Yeah, I'd love to be
Cool.
back anytime that I can contribute. I'm here for it, and I'm definitely a supporter of just the Buy Back the Block initiative, and particularly
Yeah.
for people of color, because we really don't do enough in that space, and there's so many other cultures that really get it and really work together to make that happen for generational wealth. So anything I can do to assist, I'm here for it.
I love it, man. I love it. Again, thank you for being here. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Thank you so much for supporting as you have. Other than that, this has been your episode of Financial Freedom. I have been your host and accompaniment on this journey. Trust me, family, we learn it together. Derek Brown is your fellow on this journey. We learn it together. Trust me. Uh, Thank you for tuning in tonight. Family, as always, be safe out there.
Voting, in a real sense, is a kind of prayer for the kind of world that we want to see. And our prayers are stronger when we pray together. It is the Lord's work.